Again, gold up about 10% year to date. Silver only up about 5%. Is that underperformance for silver? Should I take note of that at all?
Sure. I mean, heretofore, silver has been lagging gold, partly because it relies so much on industrial demand. So everything with the coronavirus and the slowing of the Chinese economy has dragged silver lower. It's been much more sensitive to what's been going on with the base metals like copper. But it did take out its September high from last year. It's well above 1850, and I think that allows for some positive momentum for silver to play catch-up with gold, because the gold-to-silver ratio is still extremely elevated, and I would expect to see that correct, especially if there continues to be safe haven flight into the metals generally.
All right, so you mentioned copper, and Dr. Copper usually is thought of as an economic gauge. Where it goes, so too goes the economy. Interesting to see that it's not lower today, or it's not declining more in this knee-jerk risk-off move. You can see it's declining 1.3%, materially behind oil, which is falling out of bed. Why the resilience?
That's a bit surprising. I would expect copper to respond similarly to oil, and we've seen this widening gold to copper ratio, which is usually not a very bullish sign for the broader economy. I think that copper really has a lot of headwinds against it. I don't see it continuing to rally because the stockpiles in London are rather high right now.
I've heard a lot of people point to this gap between gold and copper. Can you walk us through why this is such an important metric that people watch?
Sure, because as you said, Dr. Copper kind of is the bellwether for the commodities and manufacturing sector. And although we lump gold in with the other commodities, it has this unique monetary property to it. And so comparing gold to copper is really looking at that divergence between what is going on in the real economy and manufacturing, and then what is the sentiment in financial markets. So when gold is higher, that obviously means that fear and uncertainty are usually high. If copper is coming along with it, then that shows that manufacturing and mining are all expecting to see the commodities complex rise along with it. And right now we're seeing the opposite of that. So that's why it's such a key indicator.
So again, gold here up 1.84% today, $1,673 an ounce. Are you sensing, when you talk to your clients, speculation creeping into the market? Are people speculating on gold, saying, boy, this thing's running, I gotta get into it?
More so now, yes. There's definitely a bit of bleed over of FOMO, like we saw in the equity market earlier this year. That's now kind of been transferred over to gold. But I think another reason that you're seeing sort of a speculative fervor for gold is the expectation that central banks are going to continue to ease policy and step in when necessary. Those tools are going to be tested in 2020 for central banks, not just the Fed, but globally. As we've seen with the PBOC has also stepped in with more stimulus. So that is the narrative I'll be watching for the rest of the year, and I think it's going to cause quite a bit of volatility on top of that.
Thank you so much, Everett Millman. Thank you so much for being with us.
Appreciate
Everett
it.
Millman, precious metals specialist at Gainesville Coins, joining us here in our interactive broker studios. And just to give some perspective on that gap between gold and copper, it has reached the highest point since 2012 right now. Right. So that gap really widening out, which typically is a negative indicator for the economy. Really, the unknowns are sort of dominating today, with the idea that perhaps there is not containment of this virus, and it's unknowable to know how quickly or how far it will spread, even though we should always note that the common flu also kills thousands and thousands of people. Yep. But the issue is you just don't have the same immunity to it built into the communities. You don't have a vaccine, and you don't really have that much knowledge about the behavior of a flu like this.
No, and I think what we're seeing today, Lisa, is just the spread, the news coming out that it spread so substantially to continental Europe and northern Italy. That, I think, was new news for the marketplace. How did it get there? And where else could it go? That's kind of the new uncertainty into the marketplace that I think the market's trying to discount here.
Have you been washing your hands more frequently?
I have, and we have our little sanitizer here on the desk, which I use more often.
I mean, it's true, and I talked to a lot of people who have canceled their plans. I was speaking with someone from South Korea who is planning to head back, and they said they were no longer going to be going. So there is a question, too, of the global travel industry. $5 billion of revenues taken out.
Yeah, and we're seeing that in the stocks today, as we have over the last couple of weeks.
Indeed. Coming up, we're going to be talking more about the markets, in particular automakers and auto manufacturers, as auto sales in China and beyond plummet. You don't need a car to get around if you don't want to leave your house. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, alongside my co-host and colleague Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg Markets.
Have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking, and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway. We're with you.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, it is all about the coronavirus today, moving markets. We're going to take a look at how the coronavirus risk is set to hit German automakers who are big exporters to China. Plus, we're going to talk to Brendan Ahern of Crane Shares to get a sense of whether he thinks markets can rebound in the second half of the year in the face of this expanding coronavirus issue. Greg Jarrett first, Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, coronavirus fears are spreading over Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. All sent the stocks plummeting all over the world. Tech stocks are among the hardest hit. Tim Graff, State Street, tells Bloomberg he does not see a V or U-shaped recovery from this coronavirus effect.
You will have lost output. That's quite clear. But how high we get back is completely opaque at this point because we don't know the nature of policy response. We don't even know where the bottom of the V or the U or the square root sign even is. So it's very unclear, but I suspect we're not talking about a 100% retracement.
We're checking the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. Today, more often, the S&P's down 2.7%, down 90. Dow's down 2.8%, down 810, and the NASDAQ is down 3.2%, down 308. The 10-year's up 31 seconds with a yield of 1.36%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 4.5% at 51 even per barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.7% at 16.7720 an ounce. The dollar yen 110.65. The euro $1.857, and the British pound $1.2925. Sanofi, the French pharmaceutical giant, plans to create a standalone company to make key ingredients for other drug makers' products, and will decide on an IPO offering for the next 2 years. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway with Lisa and Paul.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. We are seeing a broad-based risk-off feel in markets today. And there's a key question here. Is it just going to be focused on the multinational companies that are most exposed to China, or is this going to be a domestic concern increasingly? So let's take a look at those small and mid-cap shares, which have consistently underperformed large-cap shares, even amid, the whole idea that the U.S. could be resilient. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, joining us here in our Interactive Broker Studios. Dave.
It's sort of the falling tide bringing down all boats at this point, because the Russell 2000 index is down 2.8%, and the S&P 500 is also down 2.8%. Where you can distinguish, though, is that the Russell has now turned lower for the year. It's off 2.2%. S&P 500 still has a 0.5% gain. Biggest drop in the Russell, at least one of them, belongs to Community Health Systems, whose ticker is CYH. The hospital owner has fallen 14.5%. Now, healthcare providers and insurers are lower after Medicare for All proponent Bernie Sanders won in Nevada's Democratic Presidential Caucus. You've got Epizyme, ticker EPZM, down about 14.5%. The drug developer reported a wider fourth quarter loss than analysts expected based on the Bloomberg survey. And Lumber Liquidators, ticker LL, it's down 15%. The flooring retailer had climbed a total of 28% last Thursday and Friday, so it's just giving back some of those gains. The Russell's biggest advance belongs to NGM Biopharmaceuticals, ticker NGM. The drug developer has climbed almost 21% after releasing favorable study data on a proposed treatment for a liver disease. And Vernedex Holding, ticker VHC, has risen more than 14.5%. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to consider an appeal by Apple in a technology patent case brought by Vernedex. The ruling involved one of two lawsuits, the man up costing Apple as much as $1 billion.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Well, we're talking about the coronavirus, obviously, today, certainly moving markets. One of the areas that is really at risk is when you think about the slowing global economy, slowing global trade, you think about the global auto business and the German automakers in particular, who are big net exporters of vehicles. Michael Dean, he covers European autos for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's a senior analyst over there. He's chatting with us from our London studio. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start off when we think about some of the big German auto manufacturers, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes. When they think about it, how much do they export to China? How much of their business is, in fact, dependent upon China exports?
Well, they're actually importing or exporting less to China because they've increased their local production. But in terms of how important the China market is for these guys, it counts for about 30 to 35% of pre-tax profit and probably about 30 to 40% of actual unit sales.
When you talk about the auto sales market in general, there's a question, if people don't go to their dealers and buy cars now, does that mean that as soon as the threat of the coronavirus lifts, they're going to then go and buy that car that they were planning to buy anyway? That, in other words, we're not going to necessarily see a decline in demand for vehicles. Do you buy that? I mean, is that sort of consistent with history?
Well, that's the big question mark at the moment. We saw that January China sales were down 20%, and the China Passenger Car Association reported that sales in the first 2 weeks of February were down 90%. So, these are big ticket purchases. Will they come back in the second quarter or maybe the third quarter? We don't know. But the Chinese market was weak anyway. It was down 10% last year. But the German automakers, the premium brands in particular, were massively outperforming. So they're very reliant on continued strong luxury sales in China.
So, Michael, what are the companies that you cover? What are they saying here? Are they really getting out in front of it with their guidance, or is it more of a wait and see, or just not really sure what the impact's going to be?
It's really difficult. We've had a few companies reporting so far. So we've had Daimler and some of the European suppliers. So they've actually set guidance for this year. But it's on the caveat that we just don't know what's going on in terms of the virus. How is it going to impact their profits this year? So it's too early to say. But we have BMW and Volkswagen reporting towards the end of March. And I would expect more of an update on what's actually happening in China at that point.
So, Michael, between the different German auto manufacturers, which are most exposed to China, or is it pretty much the same?
Well, in terms of proportion of profits, it's pretty much the same. It's about 30 to 35% of pre-tax profit. But Volkswagen's by far the biggest name in China. It has about a 19% market share. It sells over 4 million vehicles there. A lot of that's local production as well. So, it's the local production that's getting hit. They closed, or they extended the closure of their plants, post the China New Year. So it's certainly going to impact Volkswagen, but also, BMW and Mercedes are also at risk.
Hey, Michael, just give us a sense, what percentage of auto sales in China are domestic production, are domestic brands versus foreign brands, like whether they're European or U.S.?
So local production is local brand names is more like 40% in China. So, the foreign brands very much have a dominant position there. And as I said earlier, they've localized a lot of production. So BMW, for example, they produce about 400,000 vehicles in China, or they did last year. They're hoping to increase that to 650,000 by 2022. And also by 2022, they can take whole ownership of the joint ventures they have there. So they hope to increase profitability going forward.
What was the momentum like ahead of this scare?
Well, it's very weak. So last year, the market was down 9.5%, but that was for the volume market. Volkswagen actually gained market share with launching many new SUVs. And the luxury brands were actually doing really well. So BMW was up nearly 17%. Audi was up 5%. Mercedes up 14%. Porsche was up 12%. So, in terms of the outlook for this year, the premium brands are very much looking to increase their profits in China this year.
Michael Dean, thank you so much for being with us. Michael Dean, senior analyst focused on the European automotive sector for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from London. And certainly the German auto manufacturers have had a real rough go of it recently, whether it's the trade issues, whether it's the slowing economy in Germany, or now the idea that the coronavirus and fears of its spread have kept people away from dealerships. Just shocking, those numbers out of China.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the stocks over the trailing 12 months. I mean, you've got Renault off 47%. BMW off 11%, so it's some real weakness. Daimler off 18%, so some real concerns even before the coronavirus about the Chinese market and demand there. But I think longer term, people feel pretty good about it, and you're still seeing those companies invest there.
Yeah, and coming up, we're going to take a look at China and, moving from Europe to China, what the potential fallout will be. We've seen the shares sink. People expecting, though, that the PBOC will step in with stimulus. We'll dissect all of that. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with world and national headlines. Nathan.
Well, Lisa, the White House is hoping Congress will step in with more money. It's preparing an urgent budget request to deal with the coronavirus. That is as Italy becomes the focal point of concern outside China, with more than 200 cases there and 7 deaths. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus is head of the World Health Organization.
That this virus has pandemic potential? Absolutely it has. Are we there yet? From our assessment, not yet.
A senior Trump administration official says they are still developing their budget request, but it could come this week. The acting head of the White House Council of Economic Advisors says it's too soon to say how seriously the virus will affect the U.S. economy. Democrats are starting to take Bernie Sanders seriously as their presidential frontrunner now, after he won Saturday's Nevada caucuses with a coalition that looks a lot like the party as a whole. Joe Biden is still making the case he should be the nominee.
It's not just can you beat Donald Trump, can you keep a Democratic House of Representatives in the United States Congress, and can you bring along a Democratic Senate? Can you help people up and down the line? And I think I'm better prepared to do that than Senator Sanders.
The Democratic candidates meet again on the debate stage tomorrow night in Charleston, South Carolina, ahead of that state's primary on Saturday. You can hear the debate on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Boston, and Washington. It's tomorrow night beginning at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Several people are hurt after a car ran into a carnival procession today in the German town of Volkmarsen. Police are not confirming the number of injuries, but they do tell a local TV station the driver who was arrested appears to have done this deliberately. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia.
Aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
As we move towards 1 trillion connected devices, compound semiconductors made in Wales are set to power the 4th industrial revolution. Wales also has one of the largest cybersecurity ecosystems in the UK and a thriving fintech industry. 8 universities are producing a talented tech workforce for the future, and our devolved government has a strong vision for growth. If you're looking to expand your business, go to tradeandinvest.wales. This is tech. This is Wales.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
The famous five were at home discussing their next adventure. "Let's visit Tower Bridge," said Dick. "Or Cardiff Castle," added Julian. "St Michael's Mount," cried Anne. Dick jumped up. "Wherever we're going, we'll need to leave right now." "Relax," said George. "It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pajamas." With faster journeys across our network, adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Terms and conditions apply. Selected routes only.
So, this is how it is, Money. My daughter has flown the nest. I put up 10% as security for her new home. And when she keeps up with her repayments, I'm going to get it all back with interest in 5 years from Barclays. I will miss her. I'll even miss Dave, her cat. So come on, Money. How about we go buy a kitten? Barclays Family Springboard Mortgage. Make money work for you.
Your home may be repossessed if mortgage payments are missed. Deposit returned with interest after 5 years if no repayments missed. Subject to application, financial circumstances, and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks have been tumbling alongside stocks in Europe and Asia as authorities struggle to keep the coronavirus from spreading more widely outside China. Havens, including treasuries and gold, are up. Did anybody catch the falling knife? Apparently, Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, one of Canada's largest pension funds, cut its stock holdings in the nick of time as economic growth concerns heightened amid the virus outbreak. They did catch that knife. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 2.7%, down 90. The Dow's down 2.8%, down 808. The Nasdaq's down 3.2%, down 308. The 10-year is up 31/30 seconds. The yield is 1.36%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 4.3% at 51.08 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 1.5% at 16.7430 an ounce. The dollar yen $1.1065. The euro $1.852, and the British pound $1.2926. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
European stocks had their worst day since 2016. In the U.S., you had all major U.S. indices starting the open down more than 3%. Over in China, however, the share price has been muted, actually, with declines that are much smaller than what we're seeing over in Europe and here in the U.S. Joining us now to talk about what to expect going forward, Brendan Ahern, Chief Investment Officer at Crane Shares based in New York, focused on China stocks in particular. And I'm wondering, Brendan, from your perspective, is what we're seeing in Chinese equities just a big bet that the People's Bank of China will come in with any kind of stimulus to stave off steeper declines?
Well, I think that's certainly a factor, Lisa. You also have not just the PBOC, but you have fiscal policy, you have stimulus from the Ministry of Transportation. You have really a consensus to offset the weakness we're going to have in Q1. We're going to make it up in Q2, Q3, and Q4.
So, Brendan, that scenario suggests that the market's discounting that this thing is at or near peaking in terms of severity. Is there any real evidence to back that up?
In China, Paul, the cases appear to have plateaued, and that was the bottom that we saw back with SARS, going back to almost 20 years ago. So the market is forward-looking, is saying the actual cases have plateaued, and China is going back to work in a very significant fashion. Therefore, you're starting to see a pickup in some of the high-frequency economic data. And that's part of the reason you're seeing the markets respond in a positive fashion. What's important, though, this is mainland China. If your definition of China is Hong Kong or stocks or U.S.-listed Chinese companies, those are predominantly owned by foreign investors. They're selling. But the actual mainland Chinese investors are buying an important disparity.
Yeah, looking at the Hang Seng index in Hong Kong, which was down 1.8% overnight, which was much more than the Shanghai Stock Exchange Composite, for example, which was down just about 0.3%. That said, I mean, you talked about SARS. It is a very different period of time than SARS, and this is a very different illness than SARS, given how contagious it is. I'm wondering, as an investor in Chinese equities, how worried are you that as people within China start going back to work, start going to the factories, we get a reemergence of the coronavirus and it causes a much longer term disruption?
Well, the Hubei province, where the city of Wuhan is located, is disproportionately a very large percentage of the cases in China. That remains in quarantine. So I think that the view is other parts of the country have not had very significant levels of this infectious disease, and therefore it's time to go back to work. You know, that they've kind of quarantined and contained, but the rest of the country, it's time to get back to work.
So, Brennan, give us a sense of how much of the country in production is shut down. We've heard numbers as high as maybe 40 or 50%. What do you think that is at the moment?
It's coming back, Paul. That certainly the Hubei province itself, big producer of fish, shrimp, crabs, auto parts, textiles, cement, but less than 5% of China's aggregate GDP. So you have companies that are within the supply chains within Hubei, but it's not a massive amount. Aggregate utilization is picking up. So I would agree, you know, probably about half to 60% is coming back online. And it's coming incrementally, week by week, we're going to see an improvement.
So, Brendan, given the fact that you seem optimistic about a stabilization here and a ramping up of business within China, are you buying?
So on a personal basis, I am. I'll be buying today. I don't think you can plant the flag and say this is the bottom, but I think there's opportunities over the next several weeks. Remember, this Friday we have China PMI numbers for the month of February, and we kind of know they're going to be a disaster. So I think the headlines around Friday could weigh on the markets a little bit, but we know it's going to be bad, and that's why I'm not saying that this is the bottom.
Right.
But over the next several weeks, I think there is a great opportunity.
But what are you buying?
So I eat my own cooking, so I am a big investor in our Crane Shares ETFs. I love today our MSCI China A ETF KBA. U.S. investors have sold it down almost 3% below what it's worth. Literally, it's trading down. I think mainland markets will be up tomorrow, so I'm going to be a buyer of our KBA. And then I love our obviously our internet strategy around broader EM, KWeb and KEMQ are other big holdings of mine, and I love those funds as well. I mean, these are like my kids, but I'm heavily invested in the Crane Shares ETFs, and I think as a long-term investor, I think this is when people puke things up, they give it away for free. As a long-term investor, why would I not buy?
Are you seeing other buying activity from U.S. investors?
The data looks like that you're seeing selling from U.S. investors. I mean, we're in a massive risk-off day, so it's not just China; it's EM.
Right.
And anything that's beta is down. I think the important disparity is what we're seeing from data from what mainland investors are doing. They're buying mainland Chinese equities. They're actually buying Hong Kong stocks. And I just think China's maybe a little bit more forward along in this unfortunate epidemic. Yeah. But in aggregate, these numbers are very, very low. I mean, my guess is more people were killed in car crashes over the last right. 24 hours than Corona in aggregate.
Got it. Brendan Ahern, thanks so much for joining us. Brendan's the Chief Investment Officer for Crane Shares based in New York City. Lots of experience investing in China. He is buying today, buying the dip. I'm just looking at kind of one of the names that gets bandied about as a play on China, which is Alibaba. The stock is down 3.2% today. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are tumbling as authorities are struggling to keep the coronavirus from spreading more widely outside of China. The S&P 500 is seeing its biggest drop since August. The Dow erasing its gain for the year, falling more than 800 points. eBay said it's in active talks with multiple parties about a potential transaction for its classified ads business. The company said it will have an update on the process by the middle of the year. Berkshire Hathaway's massive pile of cash hovered close to a record, totaling $128 billion at the end of 2019. Warren Buffett has looked to redeploy those funds into deals, but has been put off by what he said are sky-high prices for good businesses. And Taco Bell is ready to embrace meat alternatives on the fast food chain's menu, in contrast to a previous plan. Plant-based proteins are coming to the menu in the next year at the Yum brand's own chain. That's a reversal from Taco Bell's earlier strategy to just tout its own vegetarian food. Courtney Dunhope, Bloomberg Radio.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking. Now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Bevel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard?
or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Sometimes the simplest method is the best one.
I think even I could figure it out today.
Balance of Power with David Weston.
You had a high estimate. It beat your high estimate.
Weekdays at noon Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up on Bloomberg Markets, we're going to take a look at the developing world, how it's reacting to the spread of the coronavirus as the currencies of such places as South Korea and China take a hit. Plus, we'll take a look at South Carolina, the second debate with Michael Bloomberg, the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP. We're going to discuss that. Plus, Bernie Sanders taking the front runner status. Right now, though, let's head over to our own Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Well, Christian Muller-Glisman at Goldman Sachs is talking to Bloomberg about data in the U.S. amid the fact that clusters of coronavirus cases in Italy and Iran are sending worrying signs that the new coronavirus has already spread far beyond China and is creating new outbreaks around the globe and sending U.S. stocks tumbling. Now, Muller-Glisman says data from the U.S. is still good as it seems isolated from the rest of the world with regard to the coronavirus.
I think that is probably a data lag. I think our team, they do expect eventually some hits via the supply chain, via consumption. But it feels like the U.S. is a bit of a safe haven, both on the economic side and with regards to the currency.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 2.8%, down 92. Dow's down 2.9%, down 839. And the NASDAQ is down 3.4%, down 324. The 10-year is up 31 seconds. The yield is 1.36%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 4.7% at $50.86 a barrel, with COMEX gold now up 1.6% at $16.7480 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 110.58. The euro is $1.861, and the British pound $1.2926. We've just gotten word across the terminal that the Weinstein jury has reached a verdict in the sexual assault trial. We'll have more on that coming up in the news here on Bloomberg Radio. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the sell-off that we're seeing in financial markets today suggests that investors are trying to price in maybe a larger than expected global GDP impact from the coronavirus. And of course, that impacts all parts of the market, including emerging markets. I'm looking at the MSCI Emerging Market Index year to date off 5.3%. So clearly concerns impacting the emerging markets. To get the latest, we always turn to our good friend Damien Sassower, Chief Emerging Markets Credit Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. He joins us here in our Bloomberg 1130 studio in New York. And Damien, I'm looking at a story from Bloomberg News about China and kind of the impact on businesses there. And they're saying that millions of Chinese firms will face collapse if banks don't act. So clearly the impact within China is becoming more and more profound. How does that kind of news and that risk impact emerging markets broadly speaking?
Well, when it's coming from official organizations like the Chinese Association for Small and Medium Enterprises, you have to kind of take it seriously. And what the association just said last night is that 1/3 of SMEs that they've polled have just enough cash to get through 1 month of operation, and 2/3 have just enough cash to get through 2 months of operation. So take it, with a grain of salt, but I probably wouldn't. I'd probably take that quite seriously. And as you rightly point out, the MSCI Emerging Market Currency Index has now blown through its 100 and 200-day moving averages, and the JP Morgan EM Currency Index is at an all-time low.
Of course, a lot of people just shrugging this off and saying that banks in China will be compelled to lend to these SMEs, compelled by the government to do so. Why isn't that going to just sort of stave off any potential insolvency wave that we would otherwise see?
Well, you got to remember, look, and believe me, China is very novel in terms of the tools that they're going to have at their disposal in order to try and re-stimulate. But, with shadow banking coming off a cliff, and we just got that total social financing print last week, shadow financing, which are BAs and trusts, trust loans and the like, up 180 billion yuan on the month. So, clearly they're resorting back to some of those tools that they've, kind of poo-pooed on in the past. And if they are, successful, maybe we will get a little bit of relief for private enterprise. But remember, SMEs account for 70% of China's total business revenue and 80% of employment. And if people are getting paid in restricted stock units as opposed to cash, they can't feed their children. That's going to be a big problem in China.
All right, so just broadly speaking, if are emerging market investors that you talk to, are they saying this is a buying opportunity? This uncertainty gives me an opportunity to get in here and maybe find some value where I didn't see it before, or is it something I just can't price in the risk? I'm going to have to wait on the sidelines.
I think it depends. I think now for the active managers, this is an opportunity for them to finally realize some profits, right? Because most active emerging market managers are positioning their portfolio for just such an occurrence, right? This is nothing new to emerging markets. They look for these types of moves and they look to profit from them. So, yes, it could extend, and yes, you could see people kind of, trying to add more to some of those positioning. But I think right now you basically want to kind of, take profits on it. I don't see a lot of people, except in emerging market dollar debt, really adding to current positioning. EM dollar debt's just off an all-time high. That has everything to do with low yields here in the U.S. and globally, that gravity of zero pulling down, the long end of most yield curves, and people trying to get any pickup they can, and EM dollar debt is one source of that.
I'm looking right now at the MSCI Emerging Market Currency Index, and it's at its lowest point since, I believe, October of last year. I'm surprised it's not more.
Well, I guess it depends on the constituents, and admittedly, I am not altogether familiar with the constituents in that particular index. But what I can tell you is this, if you just look at some of the moves here in Brazilian real, Turkish lira, even the Mexican peso. Look, prior to last week, we only had 3 emerging market currencies that were up on the year: the Indonesian rupiah, the Mexican peso, and the Israeli shekel. Now we're down to 1. That Israeli shekel's the lone bright spot here, up 0.84% on the year. But, it's a sea of red out there, and, you make a very good point, like what could possibly be holding up any sort of EM currency strength? I'm hard pressed to find it.
So, if I wanted to allocate some money to emerging markets, where would you suggest I find some value and just not get my head handed to me? Or is that just the risk of going into your market?
Well, I guess, look, obviously, we've mentioned this in the past, trying to scrape the bottom of the EM dollar debt barrel, looking to speculative high yield, debt, where you can get some juicy returns. Certainly there's a lot of China property issuers down there who are witnessing a bit of a cash crunch like Agile and Evergrande that could, yield you upwards of 10, double-digit percent, 10% in dollars. But if you want to look local, it's going to be those economies, those currencies that have remained relatively stable, like the, I'm going to say this with a tongue-in-cheek, Mexican peso, Indonesian rupiah, because, relative to the carry you're going to get, they still have very high nominal yields. So to capture that and relative to the currency volatility, those are probably your best bet in the current environment.
EM jokes.
Yeah.
Stable, sort of like
Hilarious.
The Mexican peso. Damian Sassower, Chief Emerging Market Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us here in our interactive broker studios, very much in the focus today. I have to say, and we've been talking about this all morning, Paul, we are not seeing capitulation. And that is, we are seeing the beginning of fear creeping into a number of markets, and we're definitely seeing a number of the consensus trades heading into 2020 turn on their heads, like weaker dollar, like stronger emerging markets. but people aren't throwing in the towel yet.
That doesn't feel that way. I mean, we opened it and we kind of been holding these levels here today. A lot of stock trading at these levels. So I think, it seems fairly orderly at this point.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we still have everything going on in Washington, D.C., and let's get a check on that. Let's head to our 901 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Well, before we get to some of the latest developments in Washington, I want to give you more on a headline that just crossed the Bloomberg terminal that Greg Jarrett mentioned just a few minutes ago. The jury in Harvey Weinstein's sexual assault case in Manhattan has reached a verdict in its fifth day of deliberations. The 67-year-old movie mogul faces 5 counts related to accusations from 2 women, including rape and a criminal sexual act. He could spend the rest of his life in prison if convicted on the most serious charge, predatory sexual assault. Now, last week, the jury suggested it had deadlocked on that most serious charge. Weinstein says any sexual encounters were consensual. Again, the jury has reached a verdict. We will bring it to you as it comes in here on Bloomberg Radio. Italy has emerged as the new focus of concern over the coronavirus. 7 deaths reported there among more than 200 confirmed infections. The World Health Organization's Bruce Aylward says China's unprecedented lockdown of Hubei province may have prevented an even wider tragedy.
The data from China continue to show a decline in new cases, which shows that the strategy of containment is having an impact in China.
A senior Trump administration official says the White House is preparing an urgent budget request with Congress to deal with the coronavirus. House Democrats had urged Health Secretary Alex Azar earlier this month to request funds for vaccine development as well as boosted screenings at U.S. checkpoints. Bernie Sanders may be the candidate to beat in the Democratic presidential race right now, but Warren Buffett says he will wait and see who gets the nomination. The Berkshire Hathaway chairman tells CNBC he agrees with Sanders the country needs to do more for those left behind. He says that shouldn't mean dismantling the golden goose of capitalism. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Vattel Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his Ph.D. at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
As we move towards 1 trillion connected devices, compound semiconductors made in Wales are set to power the 4th industrial revolution. Wales also has one of the largest cybersecurity ecosystems in the UK and a thriving fintech industry. 8 universities are producing a talented tech workforce for the future, and our devolved government has a strong vision for growth. If you're looking to expand your business, go to tradeandinvest.wales. This is tech. This is Wales.
A change is coming. Millions of people across the UK are realising that if their broadband's out of contract, they could be out of pocket. So it's time to switch and save with Vodafone Superfast Broadband for £21.95 a month. Join the Great British Broadband Switch today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
18-month contract subject to credit check. Publicly available out of contract non-promotional pricing. Superfast 1, 73% of customers receive sync speeds above 35 megabits per second. See vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
Will your summer sound like this?
Train is delayed.
Or this?
Evening, everybody.
This?
Assistant required.
Or this? This?
Make it a summer of Amex and do more with American Express experiences. With exclusive pre-sale tickets for Somerset House Summer Series, Wimbledon and British Summertime in Hyde Park. Search Why Amex. Subject to availability, terms apply.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Pancake Day is flipping fun. Pancake Day is Stella. This day will be a yummy one.
'Cause pancakes love Nutella. Pancake Day is nearly here. Gather friends and family to enjoy some delicious pancakes on Tuesday, the 25th of February. And don't forget, pancakes love Nutella.
Discover more tech, comfort and style for less. Upscale your drive at this year's Nissan Red Tag event with an additional £500 deposit contribution at 4.99% APR representative, available when you buy a new Nissan Micra N-Tech, Qashqai N-Tech or the 100% electric Nissan Leaf. Offer valid until March 31st. Offer valid on 4.99% APR representative. PCP product participating dealers only. Private retail customers only. Nissan finance subject to status 18+. Excludes CI and NI. For full T's and C's visit nissan.co.uk/redtag. Nissan. Innovation that excites. Make sure you don't miss out by visiting Nissan London West.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
On the news side of the ledger, we have gotten word here at Bloomberg that Harvey Weinstein has been convicted of rape in his New York trial. We'll have more on that coming up in news. Now, on the stock side, stocks are tumbling. Alongside stocks in Europe and Asia, authorities are struggling to keep the coronavirus from spreading more widely outside China. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is down 3.1%, down 104. NASDAQ is down 3.2%, down 934 now. That's the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 933, down 3.2%. The NASDAQ is down 3.7%, down 352. The 10-year is up 31 seconds. The yield is 1.36%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 5% at $50.71 a barrel, and COMEX gold is up 1.6% at $16.7610 per ounce. The dollar yen, 110.54. The euro, $1.0855. The British pound, $1.2921. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
On the one side of markets today, you have the spreading of the coronavirus and all of the fear of economic slowdown that ensues from that. On the other side, you have political risk, political discussions going on as the Democratic convention looks toward South Carolina. Tuesday, the debates happen, and we are getting a sense Bernie Sanders is the front runner that needs to be beaten for any of the other candidates to really emerge in a competitive way. Joining us now is Chris Liu, former Deputy Secretary of Labor and Senior Fellow at the University of Virginia Miller Center. Also, someone who has spent decades in public service working for the Obama administration and beyond. Chris, thank you so much for being with us. I want to just start with Bernie Sanders and his acceptance or lack thereof among the sort of more conventional Democratic Party. Are people starting to accept him more, or are people really pushing back within the Democratic Party on his nomination?
Well, I think you see both, but I would also caution people, look, we've had 3 states that have voted, 3 relatively small states, and yes, Senator Sanders has a huge amount of momentum right now, especially as early voting goes on for Super Tuesday, which is next Tuesday. But we've got a long way to go. You know, as I always point out to people, more delegates are going to be allocated April, May, and June than on Super Tuesday next week. And so, look, I think this is still a pretty fluid race, and as we saw from last week's debate, things can still change.
So, Chris, there's actually some growing concern that we've heard just recently that with Bernie Sanders in the lead, that were he to be the nominee, he would actually cause perhaps the Democrats to lose seats in Congress. Is that a valid concern?
It is. Look, and I think this is a concern for, I think, all when you look at any of the candidates. It's not how well you do in terms of winning the White House, and I'm confident that any of them has a pretty decent chance of beating Donald Trump. But it's what you do down ballot. I think part of the challenge is, and what we don't know, is what's the theory of the case? Is the theory of the case the Democrats need a nominee that tacks to the center to try to pick up some independents and never Trumpers, or is the theory of the case to expand the electorate? And can somebody like a Bernie Sanders bring in young voters, people of color, a lot of the people that voted for Barack Obama in 2008 but sat out in 2016?
Chris, you said you think that any of the candidates have a good chance of beating President Trump. Do you think that there is too much being made that Senator Sanders has a terrible chance or the worst chance against President Trump of all of the candidates?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you base it simply on a polls right now, you would be hard-pressed to say that Sanders is any less electable than any of the other candidates. In fact, he polls quite well. I would also caution people. I think those head-to-head matchups are a little misleading this early. You really have to look down at the battleground states, and we are a long way. I mean, once this nomination battle gets settled, no matter who it is, how well does the party come together? What does the convention look like? And then a lot of this, frankly, is about money. And I think what people should be impressed by, on Democrats, if you're concerned about Sanders, is his ability to raise money without holding fundraisers is actually pretty extraordinary.
So, Chris, we've heard some discussion kind of ramping up recently about a brokered convention. Can you define what a brokered convention is and how it might play out this time around?
Well, and I have a special perspective on this. I'm a DNC superdelegate as well, so at some point in the process, I will get a say on the nominee. So essentially what it means is that if no one can get a majority of the delegates on the first ballot, and then by the time you get to the second ballot, we should say on the first ballot, you are pledged to vote for the candidate who you supported. By the second ballot, candidates can cut deals with other ones. They can release their delegates. Superdelegates don't get a chance to vote until the second ballot. And again, I don't want to go down that road because I'm still not sure we're going to get there right now. But you could basically have, multiple voting where, different candidates drop out and you have different coalitions forming. I don't think we've had one since, I think, 1952 or so.
There's a huge risk here. I mean, this is what happened with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders the last time around in 2016. A lot of people felt like the establishment, to use President Trump's word, really hijacked Bernie Sanders' campaign, and that, there's a risk that there's going to be a repeat of that. I mean, how worried are you that is sort of going to be the impression?
Yeah, and this is part of why, as a DNC superdelegate, I'm not endorsing anybody. I'm not. My view is we're Democrats. Let Democrats believe everyone should vote. Let's let everyone in all 50 states and the 7 territories vote, and then let's see what happens after that. Because I think there's a concern that if you try to put your thumb on the scale too much, either for or against Bernie Sanders, that just upsets people on one side. We're 3 states into this. Let's let the other 50 some go ahead and vote first.
Chris, is there a sense within the Democratic power structure, if you will, the party, the National Committee, who actually is the best candidate against President Trump?
Well, and that's hard. For most of last year, we thought it was Joe Biden, and, he still polls pretty well. But obviously, we've seen, with Mayor Bloomberg coming up. And, what's interesting, however, is that when you look at the public opinion polls, President Trump basically gets about 45% against every Democrat. And a reminder, he got 46% against Hillary Clinton. So he basically is hitting where his ceiling is right now. So from my perspective as a Democratic strategist, the key is that there not be a third-party candidate and that the Democrats come in relatively united. And I think that's possible even after what happened in 2016, which was pretty contentious on the Democratic side. You largely had people, in the Sanders camp sort of fold back together and vote for Hillary Clinton.
So in tomorrow's debate, we are going to see the second performance from Michael Bloomberg, who is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the owner of this radio station. You should get that in there. Also, Tom Steyer, another billionaire, is going to be on the stage there. And I'm wondering, what would you like to see? How much would you like to see the field contract in order to create momentum behind one candidate in the near term?
Yeah, and I would like to see the field contract. And I think that's the important thing. And I take nothing away from Senator Sanders' performance in Nevada. He did incredibly well, far exceeded expectations. But there's still, well over, let's say, 60% of people in the Democratic primary or caucus in Nevada who voted for somebody else. And I just don't think we have a great sense of who is really the person that could capture the broadest coalition until we see this field shrink down. The problem is you've got, candidates who can self-fund, who don't answer to party establishment, or you've got candidates who can largely raise money through small dollars, who don't answer to party officials as well. So it is kind of the Wild West, and this is just the way we are right now in politics.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate your thoughts. Chris Liu, Senior Fellow at the University of Virginia Miller Center, former Deputy Secretary of Labor under President Obama, joining us on the phone. Just give you a quick data check, Lisa. The market's rolling over just in the last few minutes. We have the S&P plunging its lows of the day, off about 104 points. The Dow Jones Industrial's off about 934 points, and NASDAQ off 352 points. That's all north of 3% moves down in the market. So a leg lower. We will certainly bring you the latest going forward. Upcoming Balance of Power with David Weston coming up on Bloomberg Radio and Television. He will drive the conversation forward. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL. Every journey matters.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. On the brief today, Rishad Salamat from Hong Kong for the latest on the spread of COVID-19 in China. From Milan, Gerald Colton on what the virus is doing to northern Italy. And Tom Orlick from Washington on a global economy coming to terms with a virus that appears to be out of control. So, Rishad, thank you so much for joining us from Hong Kong. Give us a sense of what's going on in China. And let me be very specific. Is there a quarantine in Wuhan or not? Because I've heard conflicting reports.
David, what we have is a situation where people who are non-residents of Wuhan would have been allowed to leave the city. Don't forget, it's under lockdown, provided they weren't showing any symptoms. However, that order was rescinded shortly afterwards. So at the moment, it seems as if it is in lockdown along with the neighboring cities in Hubei province, which account for about 50 million people, where the death toll continues to mount more than anywhere else. As you've been saying, we've got the virus also spreading around the world. The WHO, the World Health Organization, saying it's not a pandemic, but saying that it is deeply worrying. Now, I was just, before we came on air, I was looking at the definition of an epidemic and a pandemic. An epidemic perhaps affects a few communities, a few regions, but a pandemic is something which goes global. We've got cases in Italy. You'll be reporting on that shortly. We've got cases in Iran, Bahrain, Kuwait now as well, to over 12 dead now in Iran itself. So is it a pandemic? It seems to certainly at the moment fulfill that particular criteria or definition.
And Rishad, specifically, what is the risk posed to Beijing? Because they've postponed, as I understand it, the Congress there. And the language coming out of the conference call that was held by President Xi suggests that he's really concerned about maybe Beijing having to shut down.
Well, indeed. I mean, 170,000 people apparently on that conference call as well, and some of the details coming out. The fear is, though, does China revert to type? Does President Xi Jinping now consolidate power after this? This is actually the question which is being asked by a lot of people. Does he use that as an excuse? We've already seen him grab power, if you will, with reducing his second term, i.e. he has unlimited terms here as well. But I just want to really get to what's going on the streets of Hong Kong, for instance. I mean, of course, we're just gone 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's very quiet out there as well. But there is an eerie sort of calm, if you will. And when we look at what's been going on with the financial markets, I mean, we've seen what's been going on with European stocks. We've had the biggest fall for them since 2016. It's almost as though this, according to for market participants, has just got real.
Exactly. Coming to terms with it finally. Very well said, Rishad. Terrific reporting from Hong Kong. Thank you very much at 1 o'clock in the morning your time. That's Rishad Salamat. And now let's go to Gerald Colton in Milan, our colleague there. And one of the concerns, I think, affecting the markets now is this spread to northern Italy, which is so terribly important to the Italian economy. Explain to us what the Italian government is doing in northern Italy.
Hello, good afternoon from Milan. Well, the government here, particularly the regional governments, are taking kind of a two-strand approach to the issue. There are a number of towns just to the south of here, around the city of Lodi, that are virtually locked down, closed. Some 50,000 people who live in that area are not able to leave, and people are not able to get in. Non-essential services have come to a halt in that area, and there is a law enforcement presence enforcing the cordon around that area. Now, in the rest of northern Italy, communities have taken measures such as canceling sporting events, canceling cultural events, moving to close bars and restaurants after a certain hour. So the approach of the governments across northern Italy has been to limit contact between people as much as possible.
And expand that out, if you would, for us. What does it mean potentially to free movement of goods within the European Union more generally? May we actually see some borders closed?
I certainly hope not. There hasn't been any indication of that happening quite yet. Although there have been some cases, some isolated cases of authorities in other countries, Austria, France, taking action to stop individual trains and buses crossing borders to check to be sure that infected people aren't on board. but there hasn't been any word on large-scale border closures or anything of that nature.
Okay, Gerald, thank you so much for reporting today from Milan. That's our colleague, Gerald Colton. And now we go to Washington. Tom Orlick will give us perspective more globally about the economic consequences of this COVID-19. What do we know? What do the economists think we know at this point, Tom?
So at this point, David, of course, we're still dealing with a significant amount of uncertainty, but there's a couple of points I would make. So the first is that a severe blow to China's first quarter GDP growth now appears a virtual certainty. And it's also striking, if you look at forecasts coming in from the street, they're coming down and down. So at the end of January, people were talking about maybe 4.5% year-on-year growth in the first quarter for China. That would already be a record low. It would mean zero growth in sequential quarter-on-quarter terms. If you look at the latest numbers coming in, they're pointing to growth in the 2 to 3% range in the first quarter, even lower than people were thinking a few weeks ago, and pointing to around a 2% contraction measured in sequential terms. The second point I would make is that until a few days ago, I think economists were really thinking about a blow to China and then spillovers from weaker Chinese demand and stalled Chinese supply chains to the rest of the world. But now, as you heard from some of our colleagues in Hong Kong and Italy, there's actually significant concern about outbreaks in other countries. Outbreaks in Italy, outbreaks in Korea. And what that means, if that happens, and of course we very much hope it doesn't, is that the rest of the world isn't just going to suffer from weakness in China in the first quarter. They're also going to suffer as their own factories get closed down by their own outbreaks.
And Tom, it strikes me one of the problems here is I'm not sure we have a model because we have a more globalized world than we've ever had in this sort of setting before. We don't know what this does to supply chains throughout the world because we're more interdependent than perhaps ever any time in history.
Yeah, that's completely right, David. If you go back to 2003, when we had that SARS outbreak, China was around 5% of exports of global manufacturing inputs, the components which factories around the world need to finish their products. 2020, as we face this coronavirus outbreak, China now accounts for 20% of global exports of manufacturing components. So the risk of a virus in one particular place, especially in China, having those severe global impacts is just much more significant now than it was 20 years ago. And I think you put it well. This is a kind of a litmus test for the capacity of a global economy to show resilience in the face of this kind of outbreak.
Okay, Tom, thank you so much for reporting. That's Tom Orlick, our colleague from Bloomberg Economics, reporting from Washington. And now it's time to check on the markets, and I don't have to ask today Abigail Doolittle about what the effect of what we're talking about is having on the markets. It's remarkable.
Yeah, we're really looking at a brutal sell-off for risk assets. Stocks here in the U.S. right now on pace for the worst day since December of 2018. That, of course, was that horrible fourth quarter volatility. So that's the degree of the selling pressure we're seeing. Bonds rallying at the lows for the 10-year yield. The best day for bonds going back to June of 2016. That, of course, was the Brexit haven bid. That's the degree of haven buying we're seeing. The yen is finally up about 1%, the best day since August. All of this is investors are really saying to themselves, this is not SARS. A week or two ago, a lot of folks were betting on the idea that this would go away quickly. It's simply unknown. We don't know what the impact is going to be on the global economy. Will it extend beyond a quarter or two?
And it strikes me, Abigail, this is quite different from December of 2018 because that, we said at the time, what's causing this? It's not clear we're causing it. This time we know what's causing it and we don't know when it ends.
Exactly. It's infinite in terms of the possibility for tragedy, unfortunately, since doctors and physicians don't really quite know how it's being spread. But if it continues to spread and continues to force various companies to shut down manufacturing, shut down operations, it will continue to eat into the corporate profit outlook. At the end of the day, that is what stocks trade off of. So we've talked many times over the last number of months, because on the trade war, we had lots of headline volatility. That really never affected the corporate profit outlook. That's why you saw stocks bounce back. In this case, we really could see the corporate profit outlook hit in a significant way. In that case, stocks should come back to earth for much more of a sane valuation. Also, there's been so much FOMO or fear of missing out buying. A lot of these indexes are so far above their moving averages. The FANG index, the big tech index, had been 40% above its 200-day moving average, telling you how overextended. But that was on falling momentum, which typically tells you there's going to be some sort of crash to earth similar to what we're seeing today.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll keep you apprised of the markets as they develop. And Abigail will be right here to do that for us. In the meantime, we're going to turn now to Mark Crumpton for Bloomberg First Word News.
David, former movie mogul Harvey Weinstein has been convicted of rape. A jury here in New York City found Weinstein guilty of rape and a criminal sexual act, but acquitted him on the most serious charge of predatory sexual assault. On Friday, jurors signaled they were having trouble reaching a verdict on that charge. Weinstein still faces sexual assault charges in Los Angeles. They were announced the day his New York trial started. Like millions of tourists who come to India, President Trump and his wife Melania visited the Taj Mahal. The president called the 17th century white marble mausoleum, quote, truly incredible. Earlier, the president began his trip by saying the U.S. will sign military deals with India worth $3 billion. He spoke at a cricket stadium filled with about 100,000 people. The White House is getting ready to respond to an urgent budget request to address the deadly coronavirus outbreak. The Department of Health and Human Services has already tapped into an emergency infectious disease rapid response fund and is seeking to transfer more than $130 million from other HHS accounts to combat the virus, but is pressing for more. A White House official says a response could come this week. In Germany, police say dozens of people are injured, several seriously, after a car slammed into a crowd at a Carnival parade. The driver was arrested, and German police say they believe he deliberately rammed his vehicle into the procession. It happened about 175 miles southwest of Berlin. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at Quick Take on Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Coming up, Nevada is in the rearview mirror with South Carolina looming. We talk with our political panel about Bernie Sanders on a roll. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
In Nevada, we have just put together a multi-generational, multi-racial coalition which is going to not only win in Nevada, it's going to sweep this country.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Will your summer sound like this?
My train is delayed.
Or this?
Evening, everybody.
This?
Assistant required.
Or this? This?
Or this! Make it a summer of Amex and do more with American Express experiences. With exclusive pre-sale tickets for Somerset House Summer Series, Wimbledon and British Summertime in Hyde Park. Search Why Amex. Subject to availability, terms apply.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. mPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
Pancake Day is flipping fun. Pancake Day is Stella. This day will be a yummy one.
'Cause pancakes love Nutella. Pancake Day is nearly here. Gather friends and family to enjoy some delicious pancakes on Tuesday, the 25th of February. And don't forget, pancakes love Nutella.
The famous five were at home discussing their next adventure. "Let's visit Tower Bridge," said Dick. "Or Cardiff Castle," added Julian. "St. Michael's Mount," cried Anne. Dick jumped up. "Wherever we're going, we'll need to leave right now." "Relax," said George. "It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pajamas." With faster journeys across our network, adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Terms and conditions apply. Selected routes only.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. Would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Really had almost a prohibitive lead. Doesn't look like that anymore. If Bernie Sanders can win in South Carolina or even take a strong second, is he stoppable?
I think if Bernie Sanders even gets a strong second in South Carolina, that gives him so much momentum for 3 days later as we get into Super Tuesday. And we're focusing a lot, I think, on the debate tomorrow night and then, of course, James Clyburn's endorsement on Wednesday. But as we saw in Nevada, those endorsements seem to mean less and less on the ground, where the culinary union was not endorsing, and yet the Latino vote, as you mentioned, many of them culinary workers, came out in overwhelming numbers for Bernie Sanders. So I think it's going to be critical, and we're seeing his campaign put a lot more resources, a lot in the air, a lot on the ground in South Carolina, where he did terribly in 2016, but may have a really strong showing in this primary.
So, James, there have been times that it sounded like the president sort of was rooting for Bernie Sanders to be his opponent because he said, I'd love to run against a socialist. Are you rooting for Bernie Sanders, or do you have some concerns about him as a possible opponent?
Well, as I've talked with the president's campaign and folks at the RNC, we've been universal that it really doesn't matter, frankly, sadly, which of the socialist policy advancing candidates the Democrats put forward. As you look on the debate stage, there is not an inch of difference between them. And sure, Bernie would save us a step because he admits he's a socialist, and he credits terrible failed socialist and communist countries, and he praises them. So that would save us a step. But I think the Democrat Party is well on their way to burning themselves down.
James, I'm sorry, I just have to really pause there for a moment. You really believe there's no difference between the moderate positions of some of the Democratic candidates and what Bernie Sanders is saying? For example, on Medicare for All, you don't think there's any difference between Medicare for All and an enhanced Affordable Care Act? There's no difference in your mind?
Well, every single Democrat candidate for president has admitted that they need to repeal and replace Obamacare. Now, they're not willing to frame it that way, but that is in fact what they're doing. They are admitting that the last giant government program they put forward was an utter, complete, total failure for average Americans. There are minor differences in what they're proposing as a replacement, but every one of them is proposing repealing and replacing with yet another bigger government program, which is a step towards socialism.
So, Jeannie, I'd like your thoughts here, because that program that Mr. Dickey says was such a failure and the Democrats are running over it was the basis basically for them to win the House of Representatives in 2018, as I recall.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they are able to hold the House and make any gains in the Senate, it will be based on that. And, you know, I would suggest that if you look at the Democrats' positions, they don't all want to repeal and replace. They've been very clear. They want to keep the Obamacare Act and they want to make it better or enhance it, as you talked about, if they're in the moderate lane. If they're in the, you know, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren lane, you know, I think there is a big difference between the moderates and the progressives, quite frankly, and it's about $50 trillion, or Bernie Sanders, who can't give us a cost. So there's huge differences among Democrats on health care, but what they all agree on is they want everybody to be covered either through Obamacare or if they're moving to a Medicare for all sort of pathway.
So, Mr. Dickey, I do want to take up one poll with you that shows that Bernie Sanders actually would do the best against President Trump in the state of Texas, albeit he would lose by 2 points. I want to be clear about that, but would do the best of any of the Democrat candidates out there so far. Does that square with how you understand the Texas voting public?
Absolutely not. In fact, what we're seeing on the ground is a ton of excitement on the Republican side, not on the Democrat side. And there are hard numbers to back that up. Democrats could only in this primary get 1,401 candidates in the entire state of Texas. For comparison, we on the Republican side have 3,106 candidates in our primary across the state. In early voting right now, even though the Democrats are the one with the high-profile presidential race, even though Sanders and a bunch of others have been here and we're here, we're seeing more votes on the Republican side, substantially more votes in early voting on the Republican side than on the Democrat side. And we saw this in Fort Bend County in House District 28 just last month, where the Democrats from all over the country poured in $2 million and almost every presidential candidate was there fighting for the Democrat candidate. And we took what had been an 8-point suburban win in 2018 and turned it into a 16-point pounding last month.
Okay, Jeannie, it sounds like he's pretty confident about the state of Texas. Where do you think Texas is?
I think Texas is still a red state, and I think it'll be a red state in 2020. I think we've seen with, you know, some advances there with Beto O'Rourke and others. Some people say it's moving purple. I think moving is the operative word. I don't think it's there yet. But I do think that that's why this is a race that's going to be decided in states like your home state of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio. And when you look there, that's why the establishment Democrats are really concerned about Bernie Sanders, because they fear a Democratic socialist agenda won't play well in those states where it matters. And that's what we heard Jim Clyburn saying over the weekend when he was on all the Sunday shows, saying this is a concern of the establishment. Democrats are going to have to battle that out in the next, few weeks at this point.
Yeah, next 10 days or so. Okay, many thanks now to our Bloomberg contributor, Jeannie Zaino, and also to James Dickey. He's the Texas GOP chairman, coming to us from Austin. Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Still ahead, we are keeping an eye on U.S. markets. Stocks are down more than 3% across the board. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Our relationship with Asia is simple. Find the most experienced journalists.
These countries will need each other more and more in the future.
Let them gather the best data and experts.
Let's get to Singapore now and our guest.
Then bring everything they find straight to you.
Let's talk about where you are. There's quite a lot of headwinds there too.
Actually, it's not simple. It's just better. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We want to return now to the markets. U.S. stocks are sinking today amid mounting fears about the coronavirus. Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons is here with more. So it is a really red day.
It is a severely red day. Right now we're looking at all three major averages down by more than 3%. For the NASDAQ, which of course is very tech heavy, we're down nearly 4%. This is the worst day for the majors since back in 2018. And there is a lot of conviction behind the selling. We're looking at above average volume. Usually so far in 2020, on days that we're down, volume is lighter. That is not the case today. People are actively selling. And you're seeing how risk off the tone is confirmed. When we look outside of equities, you have the 10-year yield now down 10 basis points. We're at 137. We are just, or 135 now. We are just, really just a few basis points away from a record low. So you're seeing that safe haven bid. You're seeing that play out in gold as well. Futures are up about 1.7. We're nearing $1,700 an ounce on gold. Just a few weeks ago, we were in the 1500s. This is a really, really swift and vicious flood out of equities and into safe haven assets.
Right now, it doesn't look like anyone is buying any dips at the moment at all. But tell us about healthcare insurance in particular that's been hit.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're seeing the usual virus suspects fall today, the likes of travel stocks, etc. But the second worst performer in the S&P 500 is Centene. You're also seeing the likes of Anthem, Cigna lower. And this really is all about Bernie Sanders winning in Nevada. The analysts are saying that the market maybe was underpricing the risk that Bernie Sanders is to this market. One analyst over at Cowen wrote in a note after he won in Nevada saying that not only is he solidifying his position, he could be a bigger threat to President Trump in the general election than the market appreciates. And of course, that's threatening for these names because Bernie is an advocate for Medicare for all. It would eliminate private insurance.
Yeah, and that's the thing you're starting to pick up on a little bit. People, as they look at Bernie Sanders, say maybe he'd be a stronger opponent to President Trump than we've given him credit for.
Well, especially when you look, he won in Nevada. It's showing that he can build a more diverse coalition of Democrats than maybe was previously thought.
Yeah, okay. Many thanks to Kaylee Lyons on that report in the markets. We're going to keep coming back to the markets throughout this hour. In the meantime, up next, President Trump's national security advisor denies that intelligence points to the Russians trying to help President Trump in 2020. But it is more open to the possibility that they may be trying to help Bernie Sanders. We talk with election security expert Jamil Jaffer of George Mason Law. That's next on Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. and global stocks are falling on the spreading coronavirus and on concerns of its economic impact. The Dow is down 951 points at 3.2%. S&P down 3.3% and the Nasdaq dropping 3.9%. But shares of Gilead Sciences are up after a senior World Health Organization official said an experimental drug made by Gilead may be effective in treating the coronavirus. In deal news, Intuit, the maker of TurboTax, is preparing to pay $7 billion for the personal finance portal Credit Karma. And food giant Cargill, which makes Purina pet foods, is jumping on the faux meat bandwagon. It'll put out plant-based products in April for humans, taking on firms like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here.
Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Revisions, return policies. There are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, Harvey Weinstein will remain behind bars until his sentencing on March 11th. After a New York jury found the former movie mogul guilty of rape today, the judge ordered that Weinstein be immediately sent to jail. He was handcuffed and led away by court officers. A jury convicted Weinstein of rape and a criminal sexual act, but acquitted him of the most serious charge of predatory sexual assault. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a major religious rights case. The court will rule in a dispute over a Philadelphia Catholic agency that won't place foster children with same-sex couples. A federal appeals court said Philadelphia could enforce a city anti-discrimination law by requiring those groups to work with same-sex couples. Catholic Social Services says that being threatened the future of Catholic agencies around the country. The 2020 presidential election is still more than 8 months away, but Vice President Pence is already laying the groundwork for a 2024 run. Vice President has his own political action committee. He also has been steadily expanding his travel as a surrogate for the president, with a focus on Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. The U.S. government began outlining its extradition case against Julian Assange in a London court today, saying he is a criminal who put many lives at risk. Officials want to try Assange on espionage charges over the 2010 publication of hundreds of thousands of secret military documents. Assange argues he was acting as a journalist entitled to First Amendment protection. Hundreds of his supporters demonstrated outside the courthouse. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Are they or aren't they? Last week, there were reports that U.S. intelligence officers had briefed members of Congress that the Russians were trying to interfere in the 2020 election, supporting both Senator Bernie Sanders and President Trump. But President Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, told ABC yesterday that he'd seen no evidence of Russian support for the president.
I haven't seen any intelligence that Russia is doing anything to attempt to get President Trump reelected.
We welcome now an expert on election security. Jamil Jaffer is founder of the National Security Institute at George Mason University Law School and also Senior Vice President of IronNet Cybersecurity. He comes to us today from San Francisco. So, Jamil, welcome back. Is it possible that Mr. O'Brien's right and also the briefer's right in this sense? There wasn't specific intelligence that, in fact, the Russians were doing this in order to get President Trump reelected, but, in fact, there is evidence they're interfering on the one hand, and there is evidence on the other hand that, in general, they like President Trump.
Well, look, I think, David, it's exactly right that we know the Russians are interfering. The Russians have been interfering in our elections since the last cycle, and they're clearly interested in causing discord in the American body politic. On top of that, you know, what we have heard from the newest reports suggests that what the intelligence briefer meant was that the Russians thought President Trump was somebody they could work with and might be approachable or accessible to them. So that might be where some of this confusion is coming from. We also see what's going on with Senator Sanders. And so what's really important here is that what's clear is the Russians are supporting both sides and really trying to create a problem within our system, trying to undermine the validity of our elections and our trust in our rule of law institutions.
And how are they doing that? Do we have a sense of that? Because as you and I have talked before, there are two different sorts of election security. One is actually tampering with the election process. That is how the votes get registered and recorded and reported. And on the other hand, sort of communication around the electoral process, misinformation, for example, just into the general echo table.
That's exactly right, David. Those two categories of election interference. What we're seeing primarily is what we've seen previously, which is this idea of them getting into the conversation and trying to manipulate the conversation so that there's a debate within the American body politic, not about the issues, but about the validity of the elections themselves, about the legitimacy of them and the like. Now, they can create additional doubt by trying to affect the actual votes, but I think they recognize that if they actually tried to change votes, that would be viewed, essentially not necessarily an act of war, but a serious matter by the U.S., and we'd be forced to take action. So I don't think they're going to do that, although we need to protect against that. And what's important there, David, is it's important that the federal government and the states work closely together, as Chris Krebs from DHS has been saying, that they need to work together really to collectively defend against this threat from an outside power, Russia.
If the bigger threat in some respects is, in fact, simply they're interfering in the form of misinformation being given to potential voters, what can be done about that?
Well, look, in part, what we need to do is to spread positive information and correct information, right? So, somebody once said that the best antidote for bad speech is more speech, not less speech. And so that's an important part of the conversation, is to correct what's being said. The media plays a role in that, but the parties need to play a role in that too. And, right now, today, we're really carping at one another. And what's important is that we come together as a nation, recognize that the Russians are coming after us, and then ultimately bring everybody together to defend these elections and protect them collectively against this threat from outside.
How much of this is social media?
Well, a lot of it is social media, right? A lot of it is sort of what happens there, where people get into these groups where they're focused on their own theory of the world, and they get that theory sort of validated over and over again, and they spiral down into these challenges. And so, what we need to do is to elevate that conversation. That's partly responsible. The candidate's responsible for that too. Whether it's Senator Sanders or another member of the Democratic Party and President Trump, they need to elevate that conversation, have a conversation about the issues, and not about sort of who did what to whom.
Do you see anyone out there right now who's taking a leadership role in a way that you think makes sense based on your expertise?
Well, I think that we have seen some good work being done in the Senate Intelligence Committee in particular. We've seen the two leaders of that committee work together to identify the threat to the United States, call it out for what it is. On the flip side, if you look over at the House Intelligence Committee, that's been a lot more challenged between Congressman Schiff and Congressman Nunes. So, there's a debate going on in the American public about the validity of our elections. And what we need to do is say, look, there's a threat coming from the outside. States need to work with the federal government. The federal government needs to work with industry, the internet industry, to identify this disinformation and allow them to take action against it, identify for them where it's coming from. And then ultimately, what we need to do is come together as a nation and say, look, there is a debate about politics. What the debate about is not about, though, is about whether the Russians are or not manipulating our elections. They are, and we need to stop that.
So we saw Mark Zuckerberg last week actually go to Brussels and call for more regulation of Facebook, his own company, in part because he wanted to reestablish a greater sense of trust on the part of users. Part of what he said is, define for us what the political speech is. Define for us what the rules are for that. Do you think that's a sensible approach? Is that something the government can do or should do?
Well, look, I think that's a hard thing to do. We've wrestled with what the meaning of free speech is in the Constitution for the better part of 200 years. It's easy, I think, for Mr. Zuckerberg to say that with Facebook having the dominant position today. Now, that being said, I think there is a role for the government to play working collaboratively with industry to identify the threats coming from abroad and saying, look, these messages are not legitimate. These are not American messages. These are messages being brought from abroad. Eliminate these accounts, take action against them. At the same time, you have to be very careful that we not get in the business of regulating speech. At the end of the day, the antidote for negative or problematic speech is more speech, not less.
Is it feasible, because you know the cyber world much better than I do, is it feasible to have a requirement, a federal requirement, that says you must disclose the source of the speech? Or at least if you can't identify it, have a flag up there that says, I don't know where this came from. It may have come from overseas, for example.
Well, I think that there's at least some level of knowledge about where some of this stuff is coming from, right? And the government has a lot of that knowledge because, unlike the private sector, the government actually lives in overseas systems, identifying threats to the country, right? Whether they're from foreign nation states or terrorist actors and the like. And if they were able to take that classified information, share it in real time with industry to better defend against social media hacking or cybersecurity threats, that could be a real benefit. Now, the Department of Homeland Security is working on those efforts. The NSA, Cyber Command, is working on those efforts. But with the threat to our election, we need to do more of that now to really defend the nation against this threat in cyberspace.
Okay, Jamil, thank you so much for being with us again. That's Jamil Jaffer. He is George Mason Law National Security Institute founder, coming to us from San Francisco. Coming up here, we're going to get more on the Democratic race for president with Jim Messina. He's former campaign manager for President Obama. Plus, of course, we are watching the markets. Stocks are plunging on fears of the coronavirus. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Leaders are born.
What does it take to get the markets back on the rails?
Born leaders are here.
The timeline for that can be slow.
Karen Moscow.
Several nations are negotiating to evacuate diplomats.
And Nathan Hager.
How are you advising clients to navigate the shifting headlines?
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5 Eastern.
Are we heading into correction territory, do you think?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are tumbling alongside stocks in Europe and Asia as authorities struggle to keep coronavirus from spreading more widely outside of China. Havens, including treasuries and gold, are surging. Just a short time ago, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had descended below 1,000 points. By as much as 1,000 points, I should say. Right now, the S&P 500 is down 3.1%, down 103. The Dow's down 3.2%, down 922. And the Nasdaq's down 3.5%, down 341. The 10-year is currently up 1 with a yield of 1.36%. West Texas Intermediate Crude is down 4.9% at $50.77 a barrel. COMEX Gold is up 1.5% at $16.7470 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 110.43. The euro, $1.865, and the pound, $29.27. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Bloomberg Balance of Power with David Weston right here on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We keep our eye on the markets because the equity markets are really selling off the United States following a European sell-off earlier. You can see across all the indices, they're down more than 3%, most down with the NASDAQ. In the meantime, as we look over at bonds, the 10-year U.S. bond is really gaining there. Now you can see they're down 11 basis points, down to 136 now in the yield for the 10-year. Gold is up, approaching now $1,700, and the dollar index is slightly weaker there as the yen has strengthened today, unlike last week. The yen has strengthened, but the dollar is slightly weaker. We'll keep watching those markets carefully throughout the hour because they are clearly moving. In the meantime, let's come back to the United States and to the Democratic race for president. Bernie Sanders added to his lead with his resounding victory in Nevada on Saturday. And if the polls are any indication, he has the momentum going into South Carolina and then on to Super Tuesday. For some perspective on the race and the state of the Democratic Party, welcome now Jim Messina. He's former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President Obama and the manager for President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. He's coming to us today from San Francisco. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. You have said that you think that Bernie Sanders may be the worst candidate to go up against Donald Trump. Do you still feel that way? And if so, why?
Look, I think his general election vulnerabilities are difficult for him, right? He's proposed massive tax increases on health insurance. He wants to get rid of Obamacare, which provides a bunch of swing voters protections that they very much care about. I haven't said that he can't win, but I think of all the major candidates, he'd have the biggest struggle.
And as a practical matter, can he be stopped? I mean, what does he need to do in South Carolina, for example, with Joe Biden? Joe Biden had been, it looked like almost the prohibitive favorite in the polls until recently, and now it looks like Bernie Sanders is gaining on him.
Yeah, I think we got to pump the brakes on this Bernie has it sewn up thing. I mean, only 3% of delegates have voted here. Super Tuesday is another 38%. We'll know much more about the race after Super Tuesday. But this weekend, if Bernie Sanders can beat Joe Biden in South Carolina has always been the state that Joe Biden says is his firewall. His African-American support, coupled with his support with older voters, has always made him the favorite. And so, if Bernie Sanders can pull the upset there, that would be a very difficult moment for the vice president, and it would start having people look for other candidates if you're in the anti-Bernie lane.
Well, and that raises the question exactly. I've always been told, I don't know if it's true, that you can't beat somebody with nobody in politics. So if it's not Joe Biden, who would it be? Who do you think might be able to actually stop Bernie Sanders if that's the goal?
Well, then I think you'd look to Michael Bloomberg. You would look to perhaps Elizabeth Warren. But those are the only candidates I think can actually put it together right now. And the other candidates are beginning to struggle. And if you're anti-Bernie, you've got to get some of these candidates out of the race, right? You just have too many anti-Bernie candidates splitting the vote. You saw that in Nevada very, very clearly with the vice president doing well, Amy Klobuchar, Tom Steyer, Mayor Pete. All those guys are splitting the anti-Bernie votes while Bernie has, a third of the votes, and he's starting to rack up these wins because his third is solid and everyone else is splitting up the vote.
Michael Bloomberg, of course, is the founder and majority shareholder of Bloomberg LP, our parent company. I think by most views, he did not have a particularly strong outing in that first debate. We've got another debate tomorrow night. What does he need to do if he really wants to try to be the alternative to Bernie Sanders?
Well, unlike last debate, which was all about Michael Bloomberg, this debate's going to be all about Bernie Sanders. Everyone is going to come after him because it's in their best political interest to do that. Bloomberg has to have some better answers for the fairly obvious questions he's going to get on women's issues, on stop and frisk. It's hard to do the first debate. These other candidates have done 9 other debates. And, I think Bloomberg just needs to have a more steady debate where he lays out his vision of, 1, his record as mayor of New York, and 2, that he's the candidate that can beat Donald Trump. If he can stick to that and not spend the whole time on defense, I think he'll have a better moment. And, David, people forget that in these Super Tuesday states, which we're under 2 weeks away from, he's drastically outspending everyone in these states. And so he just needs to right the ship a little bit, have a good debate. One bad debate doesn't kill your candidacy. As you remember, in 2012, Obama had the worst first debate in American political history, righted the ship in the second debate, and beat Mitt Romney handily in the election. So, people need to just watch Bloomberg. And I think, if I'm Mayor Bloomberg, I'm going to take the fight to Bernie a little bit tomorrow night.
In the meantime, as you say, the critical question perhaps is somebody else going to drop out? Do you see any indication that any of the alternatives in the moderate lane are inclined to drop out?
Well, I don't see how Tom Steyer stays in this race very long, right? He spent drastic amounts of money in Nevada and got almost nothing for it. He spent a bunch of money in South Carolina, and we'll see how that does it for him. But if he can't move in South Carolina, I would think that Steyer would be the first one out of this race.
Is there an argument for Bernie Sanders that he is authentic? I think everyone agrees he's authentic. He generates real passion. He is something of a celebrity. He has an operation, Bernie Bros, as I guess they're called. That in fact, he may be the alternative to Donald Trump. A lot of those attributes are ones that are attributed actually to President Trump.
Yeah, the argument for Bernie Sanders is that he can expand the electorate and he can get a bunch of people excited about politics, young voters, minorities, people who feel disenfranchised by the process, and get them to vote in an election where they don't usually vote. That's the argument for him. Interesting, in 2016, that's exactly what we saw. He brought real numbers of new voters into the process where he did much better against Hillary Clinton than everyone assumed he would. I think what you've seen so far, though, is less of a turnout than people expected in the early states, and less voters kind of coming and being excited by Senator Sanders' candidacy than I think his supporters would have expected. He's still doing really well because, again, he has his third of the Democratic Party who's showing up in all these things, and he's getting about a third to 40%, and that's enough to win these states. But so far, we haven't seen him expand the electorate in a way that he will need to win in November.
Jim, I wonder if you're perplexed at all, surprised by those turnout numbers, because some people, at least, were saying it's not so much that we're going to be so enthusiastic for somebody, we're very enthusiastic against someone, that is the President of the United States. And that will really generate a lot of passion on the Democrat side for just about anybody as an alternative to Donald Trump. Maybe we should revisit that assumption?
Well, it's interesting. In the 2019 off-year governor's elections in southern states like Kentucky and Louisiana, you saw the highest turnout that both parties had in over 50 years. In 2018, David, as you and I have talked about before, we had the highest midterm election turnout in 102 years. You're not seeing that in the Democratic primary. I think there's a couple reasons for it, but it does kind of stand to make people think about, could Bernie Sanders really expand the electorate in the way he's claiming? Because so far we haven't seen that.
But we haven't seen it for anybody else either, have we?
No, you haven't seen it. I mean, the New Hampshire numbers were better than 2016. They were approaching 2008, but Iowa numbers and Nevada numbers weren't a big explosion in turnout. I think better numbers will be Super Tuesday when you have 40% of voters voting, and that's almost a national primary, considering that California and Texas are now at Super Tuesday for the first time. So I think we'll have a better judge of that after Super Tuesday.
Okay, Jim, really always a treat to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time. That is former White House Deputy Chief of Staff. He's Jim Messina. And coming up here, U.S. stocks fall on the pace for their worst day in more than 2 years now, while fears of the coronavirus are suddenly gripping Wall Street. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information sooner?
What does this tell us about the state of deal making?
Let's fix that.
One unprofitable company plus another doesn't make a profitable company.
Carol Mazur.
Talk to us about real-world applications.
Jason Kelly.
Remind us what the potential is for everyday folks.
Bloomberg Business Week.
Vice President of Exploratory Science is one of the cooler titles.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm David Weston. U.S. stocks are plunging today alongside markets in Europe and Asia as the coronavirus continues to spread more widely outside China and fears grow. For more, let's bring back now Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle. So it doesn't look any better than the last time I talked to you.
It certainly doesn't. And from the last time we did speak, just about half an hour ago, stocks actually made new lows at one point on pace for the worst day in 2 years since February of 2018. So the sellers are really not relenting at all as this fear now grips the market that this coronavirus could really dent the global economy, economic growth, and perhaps it will extend beyond a quarter or two. Maybe we will see more companies similar to Apple having to revise their views down. It's that unknown factor at this point. There was such a period of time, a long period of time, where folks were comparing it to SARS and thinking it was somewhat contained. But as you were saying earlier in the hour, we just don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty here.
And you and I have talked about that at various times, why the markets actually were doing so well, considering that we don't know. But talking about global, for example, it started with Asia, but then Europe really got hit on the equities before we got to the United States. And this is a continuation of what we watched over the last 24 hours.
Yes. Well, one of the market experts that we talk to frequently on charting futures and smart charts, Eric Dugan of 3D Capital Markets, he talks about the global relay race and that it always starts in Asia. So Asia was mixed, but the Kospi index in particular, the Korea index, it was down nearly 4%, the worst day since 2018. And of course, the virus is really spreading in Korea, causing a large quarantine there. The fears spread to Europe, down 4%, the worst day since 2016. At that point, we have bonds here in the U.S. on pace for the best day since 2016. Speaking of bonds, we have the 10-year yield almost about to make a new record low. That's the degree of the fear and the uncertainty.
And as you suggest, whether it's a Kospi or whether it's in Europe, there could be a double effect here. Because Kospi often you look at about trade, it says surrogate for trade, we're worried about the global growth in trade. But they also have coronavirus in Korea. And in Europe, on the one hand, you're worried about what that does, the problems with China, with what happens in the European economy, but they have it in North Italy. So it's hard to determine how much is actually a direct effect of what's going on as opposed to the markets.
Well, as you're saying this, David, the other thought that comes to me is if it does come here to the U.S., because for the most part here in the U.S. it's been isolated, but this idea that it really is concentrated in Asia, there is some now in the Middle East and in Europe. And if it were to come to the U.S., there could really be a greater issue in terms of the effect on the corporate profit outlook. Last Friday, of course, we had that very weak market PMI, the worst since 2013, I believe, as services plunged. So it's clear that there's already an effect here. But if this tragedy were to spread here, it could hit the corporate profit outlook even more. And I think that is probably a worry that some investors are reckoning with today.
And if you look at sector by sector, energy, obviously, oil's getting killed. Financials, you just mentioned the 10-year yield, but banks don't usually do very well in that. FANGs, the tech sector, really getting hard. So if you look at sector by sector, some of the ones that could be leading on the upside are really getting hit the hardest.
Yeah, it's brutal in terms of the degree of the selling. It's one of those moments you often hear traders talk about, the idea when the music stops, will you have a chair? And it's that sort of rush for the exits here that we're seeing where traders and investors are just selling indiscriminately. And we were just taking a look at the IMAP and we see all of that red on the screen. Something else that I think is worth taking a look at in the Bloomberg terminal, we've been tracking all of the different asset classes since the beginning of the outbreak of the coronavirus. And not surprisingly, right from the start, the risk assets did very poorly, including oil and copper, the Dow transports, the Shanghai composite. However, last week or even a week before, the S&P 500 at one point was beating bonds. That's the degree of blinders that investors had on, not really factoring that this could really play in. But now bonds are up top. The S&P 500, interestingly, down about 2%, actually worse than the Shanghai composite, which is sort of a strange twist, hard to explain. Maybe, again, the fear that we have not seen the worst yet here in the U.S.
Who has a hard job tomorrow is Rich Clarida, the vice chair of the Fed, who is appearing at the NABE conference because people are going to look into the Fed to see, is there anything you can do to help us here?
Agreed. And when you had your exclusive interview with him not so long ago, he was saying if this extends beyond a quarter or two, it could affect policy.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle for keeping us abreast of the markets. Coming up, Balance of Power continues on Bloomberg Radio. We're going to have more coverage of the market sell-off as virus fears continue to grow. Plus, an interview with the head of the Port of Los Angeles. We'll find out how the virus is affecting shipments into his port in Los Angeles. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. In America's richest town, making $500,000 a year is now below average. You could easily drive through Atherton, a leafy Silicon Valley suburb, without realizing you were in America's richest neighborhood. The cheapest house on the market is currently listed for $2.5 million. For the fourth straight year, Atherton, California topped Bloomberg's Richest Places Annual Index. Google's Eric Schmidt, Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg, and the Golden State Warriors' Steph Curry all call it home. Joined by its Silicon Valley neighborhoods Hillsborough at number 3 and Los Altos Hills at number 5. But it's Scarsdale, New York, less than 25 miles outside Manhattan, with an average $452,000 in annual household income that takes the number 2 spot. Also making the top 10 richest places in the U.S. are a town near Denver, 2 northern suburbs of Chicago, and a wealthy enclave in Dallas. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow enjoy each other's company.
Most of us don't speak Mandarin. John, do you speak Mandarin?
I do not speak Mandarin.
I just wanted to check that.
Almost as much as they enjoy grilling economic experts.
When this is over, do you bounce back, or is there a lasting weakness to it?
Which means that you will enjoy listening.
If things get worse, we're ready to do more.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Steep losses for global stocks. U.S. equities tumbling alongside stocks in Europe and Asia as authorities struggle to keep the coronavirus from spreading more widely outside China. Havens, including treasuries and gold, surged. Stay with Bloomberg for the very latest on these fast-moving markets. Here's where we stand right now with the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 1,008 points. That is a drop of 3.5%. The S&P 500 index down 113 points, down 3.4%. And the NASDAQ Composite Index down 366 points. For NASDAQ, that is a drop of 3.8%. Both the Dow and the S&P 500 index have wiped out their gains for the year. Well, as for the market backdrop, Drew Mattis is chief market strategist at MetLife Investment Management.
There's so many things out there in the world today, and the virus is the key one right now, which no one on Wall Street is really an expert on. And so we're relying on other people. We're getting conflicting advice. We don't know what the range of outcomes are. And even if we did know what the range of outcomes were, we have no way of assigning probabilities to them.
And oil is tumbling on intensified fears that the coronavirus will harm global growth as the contagion spreads to 30 more countries. West Texas Intermediate crude here in New York down 5%, $50.70 a barrel. Brent $55.41 for Brent. That is a drop there of 5.3%. Among some of the big tech names, Apple, for example, with the supply chain in China down 4.4%. Google, Alphabet down 4.6%. Facebook slumping now by 5.4%. The 10-year yield there 1.35%. We've got gold up 1.9%, $16.73 the ounce, up $30.65. And again, crude WTI down by 5.1%. Recapping, U.S. equities lower now with the Dow down 1,023, down 3.5%. S&P down 115, down 3.4%. Nasdaq down by 3.9%. 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report. Lots to talk about. Here he is, Dave Wilson, with a focus on American depository receipts.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are tumbling along with U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 3.6%, and the S&P 500 is lower by 3.4%. ADRs of commodity producers are falling on concern that the spread of coronavirus will curtail demand in China and beyond. Australia's BHP Group is down 5% in U.S. trading. The UK's Rio Tinto is down 6.1%, and Brazil's Vale is down 7.7%. Ireland's Ryanair Holding has lost 12.2%. The discount airline is lower on the prospect that the coronavirus will keep people from traveling. Other European airline ADRs are lower in more limited trading. Air France KLM is down 8.9%. British Airways owner IAG is down 9.9%, and UK discounter EasyJet is down 15.6%. Now, gold mining ADRs are higher as the precious metal climbs towards $1,700 an ounce. Canada's Barrick Gold is up 4.5%, and Anglo Gold Ashanti, based in South Africa, is up 5.5%. And China's ZTE has risen 8.6%. Pacific Securities said the phone equipment maker stands to benefit from Chinese government efforts to bolster the economy in response to the coronavirus. The firm cited meetings of 2 government agencies on Friday, Charlie.
And we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, following those American depository receipts. Again, recapping now, we have got the Dow, the S&P, and Nasdaq all slumping. Right now, we have got the Dow Jones Industrial Average at the low of the day, down 1,044 points. That is a drop of 3.6%. Again, repeating and recapping on the S&P, down 117, down 3.5%. Nasdaq down 379. That is a drop of 4%. Keep it locked in to Bloomberg Radio for the very latest on this Monday sell-off. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We're going to grow our trade relationship.
I know what's broken. I know how to fix it.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Iran hardliners reportedly win big in parliamentary elections. Julian Assange is in a British court today defending against extradition to the United States. And COVID-19 hits supply chains, commerce, and the economy in ways the markets are only beginning to realize. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. Each day brings new stories of the spread of the coronavirus, from northern Italy to South Korea to Iran, and the potential effects on global commerce are only beginning to be felt. White House economic advisor Peter Navarro says it's all because we've come to rely too heavily on global supply chains.
We've offshored far too much of our supply chain, not just for corona, but also for the essential medicines we need. Same reasons we offshored a lot of our other stuff. It's cheap labor, environment, lax environment, and most of all, unfair trade practices.
Welcome now someone on the front lines of global trade. Gene Soroka is Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles, the nation's biggest and its busiest port. So, Gene, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Dave.
First of all, give us a sense from the front lines. How badly is your business being hit right now?
We're running about 75% of normal container lift, and we have 40 vessel sailings canceled from February 11th through April 1st now.
Do you have any visibility going out?
Beyond that, our guidance for the first quarter of the year is that we'll be down about 15%, and it looks like it's going to take us some time to get back to a sense of normalcy within our supply chain.
Well, that's one of the questions, because a lot of people, economists early on, said this is more like a V. It'll come bouncing right back like SARS. Is this like SARS, do you think?
I lived in Shanghai during SARS. It's not. What we see is that it's going to take a prolonged period of time to get workers back to the factories, to get the momentum going behind production, and then movement out to the ports. All of those supply chain partners right now are working with skeleton crews. And moving forward, yes, we may see a big spike, but I don't know when that's going to start. Then you'll get into normal or traditional peak season, back to school, et cetera. So there's going to be something moving here that's going to keep pinching towards the middle.
How do people, you, but also shippers, adjust to this as a practical matter? Are there other changes you can make to fill up the supply lines?
Yeah, we have to be nimble, number one. But it's an asset balancing equation that we're trying to play right now. With these ships being canceled coming in, we've got empty containers piling up here in the United States and specifically at our ports. If there is going to be a rebound and a spike once folks go back to work in Asia and China specifically, it's going to take those empty containers being repoed over there to be positioned to load up and bring back. So this teetering back and forth, not so much having the ability to have a balanced supply chain, is really going to be the equation we have to solve for.
Are there some suppliers around the world, China, who might be in a position to step into the breach?
To an extent, and with the ill-advised trade debate that we had, which resulted in a fourth quarter drop in our volume of more than 16%, we've started to see that migration to Southeast and South Asia as far as U.S. companies of import records sourcing cargo factory design. What I mean by that is that it takes about 7 Vietnams to make up for China. But we did see double-digit growth in Southeast Asia origin shipments to the U.S. through the Port of Los Angeles last year. Key stat, though, is for every new container we gained from Southeast Asia, we lost 2.5 from China.
Wow. How do you protect against the safety risks? I mean, of people coming on the ships, of possible infections of some of your people, let me say, at the Port of Los Angeles.
Yeah, the U.S. Coast Guard jumped into action very quickly as we started to have this global conversation, resetting the regulations, making sure that our Los Angeles Port Police, all the other allied agencies, including the CDC in Atlanta and LA County Health, were involved. We have a little bit different view, as it takes about 14 days from a vessel sailing into Los Angeles from its origin, which could look like some of the metal experts' advice on the incubation period. We're also watching our cruise and disembarkation locations from passengers who have gotten on from earlier stops.
What about Mr. Navarro's point? Does he have a point? In fact, in this sense, is it possible people will rethink supply chains because of this?
Yes, and that's been ongoing because of the past 20 months worth of rhetoric back and forth between Washington and Beijing. As I mentioned, you have seen sourcing migration take place now down to Southeast and South Asia. There's always been this conversation in our area around China plus one. Did we as a collective have too many eggs in one basket, and could you find relief valves in other places? This is a temporary look, but remember also, the U.S. economy has been strong for the better part of the time since the recession. So the factories in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, et cetera, have been running at full bore for a long time too. Now an importer who wants to change sourcing from China to these other locations is fighting for factory floor space.
How much of your business comes from China? How much of it comes from Asia more generally?
A little bit more than 50% from China and about 98% in total from Asia.
Wow. So does this change your long-term projections, your long-term strategy for
the rules?
Los Angeles?
Yeah, Dave, the rules have changed, so we have to reinvent ourselves. We must be nimble. I think there's a bigger play here for American exports going to Asia, because what that will do, in effect, losing imports, gaining exports may balance out our trade a little bit, and more importantly, our cost to serve. We can then be a more attractive gateway for those who want to work with us.
And what does this do to margins as a practical matter?
Overall, it compresses margins. We saw that from earnings reports last year in 2019 to what our industry is doing with respect to the downline look and market guidance. And for us, it's a movement of revenue that if we're down 15% in the first quarter, that has a direct impact on how we reinvest in our port's physical, digital infrastructure, as well as our environmental strategy.
Who are your competitors?
A few seconds left. Joe Wiesen.
Right next door, the Port of Long Beach. ports along the West Coast. But more importantly, what we've seen as a trend over the last 18 years is the strongest competition we face is coming from the East and Gulf Coast ports. They've hired great talent, invested a tremendous amount of money, and they found the legislative powers to attract business.
Fascinating. Really appreciate you being here. That's Gene Siraca of the Port of Los Angeles. He runs it, and it's the biggest and the busiest in the country. Coming up, equity markets are down around the world as investors come to terms with the possible effects of COVID-19. We talked with Bloomberg Senior Markets Editor Mike Regan. That will be coming up next. We are on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia.
Aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Will your summer sound like this?
Train is delayed.
Or this?
Evening, everybody.
This.
Assistant required.
Or this. This.
Or this!
Make it a summer of Amex and do more with American Express experiences. With exclusive pre-sale tickets for Somerset House Summer Series, Wimbledon, and British Summertime in Hyde Park. Search Why Amex. Subject to availability, terms apply.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
the puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Lows of the day for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Equities tumbling alongside stocks in Europe and Asia as authorities struggle to keep the coronavirus from spreading more widely outside of China. Havens, including treasuries and gold, are surging. Right now, we have got the 10-year with a yield of 1.35%. Gold advancing 2%, $16.76 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil plunging 5.4%. WTI $50.48 a barrel. Brent $55.21, a drop there of 5.6%. Fast-moving equity markets. Keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio for the latest, with the S&P down 122, down 3.7%. The Dow is down 1,076 points now. That is a drop of 3.7%. The NASDAQ Composite Index plunging 395 points, and that is a drop now of 4.1%. Both the S&P and the Dow have turned negative for the year. Recapping stocks lower, S&P down 3.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of power continues. Once again, here's David Weston.
Thanks very much, Charlie Pellet. Let's pick up on that subject of the markets. From the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. Equity markets are really catching up to the coronavirus, with the European stocks selling off some 4% overnight and U.S. markets on a similar path now. To take us through what looks like equity's worst day in years, we welcome now Mike Regan. He's Senior Markets Editor for Bloomberg. So welcome, Mike. As I say, I'm looking at it right now, between 3.7 and NASDAQ's down 4.1, something like that.
Yeah, looking like the worst day for the broad indexes since early 2018. Remember, that's when we had that real volatile market, after what a lot of people called a melt-up, that sort of really ferocious rally at the end of 2017. Dave, one sector I'm looking at is the managed healthcare stocks. Basically your big health insurers, United Healthcare, that sort of company. They're down as a group in the S&P 500, 7.5%. That's the worst drop since 2011, and really some really eye-popping moves throughout that index. I'll just give you an example. United Health down 7.7%, Centene Corp down 10%, Anthem, Humana, they're both down about 6%. So, obviously the virus like this could be a big threat to health insurance companies. But you got to remember the other big news over the weekend, which was Bernie Sanders doing very well in Nevada, winning the Nevada primary. And we're starting to get some comments in from analysts and traders saying, don't get me wrong, the coronavirus is the main catalyst for the markets today. But I think, it's hard to separate sort of the effects of a Sanders win and the virus itself. Banks are down big as these yields come down. But I do think there is a little bit of Bernie in the market today. People sort of rethinking his chances at winning not only the primaries and winning the nomination, but winning the whole thing. And there's been quite a bit of commentary from traders sort of talking about that. Obviously not the main issue with the market today, but something else lurking there in the background.
Well, it's interesting to me that we had something like that with the managed healthcare stocks last fall with Elizabeth Warren, when her numbers were ticking up, and they really took a hit there for a while. And then they corrected as Elizabeth Warren came off. It didn't happen with Bernie Sanders when he won Iowa, or at least came in a narrow second in Iowa. And then when he won New Hampshire, didn't happen. But for some reason, Nevada maybe got their attention. Yeah,
I think a couple things. People thought, Bernie might win a couple states. They weren't sure that Iowa and New Hampshire was sort of indicative of the rest of the country. Now they're coming around to the idea that, not only might he get the nomination, but people are talking about his chances of actually winning the whole thing. It was kind of considered like against Trump, he would be the weakest candidate, but he's got so much momentum behind him now. And obviously, what's the issue? Well, he wants Medicare for all, which obviously is bad news for these health insurance stocks. And there's all sorts of game theory going on about how, what the chances are that he can really push through that type of an aggressive sort of shift in the national health insurance industry. But I think it's enough to sort of get people a little bit spooked. Again, the virus is really the main issue today, and these stocks would probably be down pretty big regardless. But looking throughout sort of the leadership of the market, they're among the worst hit, these managed healthcare stocks. Technology getting hit a lot too. The other stocks really getting hit a lot are the ones that really just had a lot of momentum, a lot of gains, a lot of wind at their back coming into this, and some high valuation stocks. Where
are the financials? Because goodness knows, I mean, the yield is down like under 1.36 now in the 10-year.
Yeah,
they've given up 11, no more than 11 basis points. Typically, that's not good for financials.
We're getting very close to record lows for many treasury yields, and financials are as a group down about 3.5%. So sort of in
that's
line
with the market, basically.
In line with the market. If you narrow that down to just banks, you're down about 4%, so a little bit more than the market. It's kind of a sell everything day. I mean, there's no sector in the S&P 500 among the main 11 that's up, and the best performing one, utilities, is still down more than 1%. So it's really basically just kind of a sell everything type of day. Though you can, obviously, from the leadership, sort of gauge what people are mainly worried about. Energy, once again, is the worst performing sector, down about 4.7%. Oil prices are really getting hit. You're starting to see people really sort of rethink the ultimate damage to the economy that will be done from this virus. Goldman Sachs is reducing its first quarter GDP forecast, and this all comes after that sort of disappointing PMI number on Friday. Services below 50, meaning contraction. So it's all starting to add up.
I wonder whether there's one big difference between now and late 2018, because late 2018, that was something where the Fed could sort of step in and say, okay, we're going to take care of this. We're going to cut some rates some, and then sort of help bring it around. I think it's fair to say. It's not clear to Rich Clarida we're going to hear from tomorrow at the NABE conference. I'm not sure what the Fed can say that'll turn this around.
Right. I mean, if you look at the Fed funds futures market and euro dollars, they're definitely ratcheting up bets for more easing from the Fed. But the question is, what will drop in interest rates do to the economic damage being done? It's not clear that there was necessarily a boost to the economy. Maybe markets will take it as a positive. It's always better for the stock market to have lower interest rates. But as far as really halting this deterioration in the economic data that we're about to see, it's not really clear that a rate cut will do anything for that.
Yeah, it's not clear either whether it's a PBOC or the Fed whether a rate cut's going to get workers back to work in Ube.
Right. Exactly. Right.
That's the way that works.
Yeah. Such a different threat and risk to the markets than almost everything we've seen. The market was very complacent to it heading into this, thinking China had it contained, but now it's really a rethink across the board.
Not complacent now. Okay, many thanks to Bloomberg's Mike Regan. Coming up, it's been years in the making, but today Julian Assange began his legal battle in a British court to resist extradition. We talk with Anna Bradshaw of Peters & Peters in London. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are plunging alongside stocks in Europe and Asia on the spreading coronavirus. The Dow is down 1,054 points, or 3.6% to 27,936. S&P dropping 3.6%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq is down 4%. Crude oil dropped on intensified fears that the coronavirus will harm global growth. But shares of Gilead Sciences are up after a senior World Health Organization official said an experimental drug compound made by Gilead is the one drug that might be effective in treating the virus. PepsiCo is expanding in China. The soft drink and snacks food maker is buying a Chinese snacks company known as B & Cheery for $705 million. B&Cherry products include nuts, dried fruits, meat snacks, and baked goods. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
National origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right. Use it. To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
How should investors be positioning?
We go there.
Talk about export numbers because they've been quite shocking. Korea, we saw Singapore, Japan too.
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, the United States says he needs to come here to face criminal charges for his WikiLeaks. He says it's all political. We're joined by my colleague June Grasso to talk about Julian Assange's fight against extradition beginning today in a British court. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, David Weston. In just 2 days, U.S. stocks have lost more than $1 trillion in value, looking at a 977-point drop right now for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, down 3.4%. S&P down 110, drop there of 3.3% as well. NASDAQ down 356, a decline of 3.7%. U.S. equities tumbling alongside stocks in Europe and Asia as authorities struggle to keep the coronavirus from spreading more widely outside China. Dramatic day across markets. We've got the 10-year yield now 1.36%. Gold surging 1.8%, $16.73 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down almost 5%, $50.83 a barrel. Brent crude 55.63. It is down by 4.9%. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all lower, opening down by about 3%. The selling continuing as the session goes on. Stay with Bloomberg for the latest on these fast-moving markets. Another regional factory report is signaling relief for America's beleaguered industrial sector. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas reports its regional factory index scored a positive reading this month. The first positive reading since September, with both production and orders advancing, and the outlook for Texas manufacturers improving. Recent factory reports from the New York Fed and Philadelphia Fed also suggest manufacturing could be steadying. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Philadelphia Semiconductor Stock Index moving lower by 4.9%. Among some of those chip stocks today, Intel slumping by 3.3%. Lots of earnings after the bell. We'll be hearing from Hertz Global Holdings, Intuit, HP Inc., Palo Alto Networks, and Shake Shack. Recapping, sell-off on Wall Street with the S&P now down by 109 points, down 3.3%. The Dow down 3.3%. NASDAQ down 3.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. And once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thanks so much, Charlie Pellet. He spent 7 years holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, followed by another year in a British jail, all to avoid answering 18 counts in a U.S. criminal indictment that he compromised national security by obtaining classified documents that he published to the world. Today began Julian Assange's legal fight in a British court to avoid extradition to the United States. To go through the proceeding, we welcome now my colleague June Grasso and Anna Bradshaw, a partner in the London-based law firm of Peters & Peters, where she specializes in white-collar criminal law. So for those of us here in the United States, Anna, who don't understand the extradition proceedings in the UK, give us a sort of a précis. Give us a sense of what is required to be proven.
Well, the starting point really is that extradition requests should be granted. That is the ordinary course of action, and that is how international cooperation in criminal justice works globally. Now, having said that, there are traditional bars to extradition which have existed for almost as long as the extradition process itself. So, for example, traditionally you would not expect extradition to be granted for political offences, and you wouldn't expect extradition to be granted for military offences. Many countries still today refuse to extradite their own nationals. The UK is not one of those. But that has also been one of the traditionally recognized grounds. More and more these days, we see human rights type arguments being raised to resist extradition. And it's very much on that theme that the Julian Assange defense team appears to be focusing.
If the classified or confidential secret documents had been British government documents, and Mr. Assange had done this, would he be subject to criminal prosecution in the UK?
Well, that's the very first test here. So the so-called double criminality requirement has to be satisfied. You can only be extradited for an offence if the offence that you're being sought for would amount to an offence here in the UK as well. And the argument on the part of the US government or the Crown Prosecution Service here representing the US government is that the charges against Julian Assange in the US would amount to offences under UK law. Computer hacking is an offence under the UK legislation on misuse of computers, and the offences, the Espionage Act offences in the US would correspond, broadly speaking, to offences under the UK's Official Secrets Act.
Is he specifically being prosecuted for the Espionage Act charges?
Sorry, so the test that would be applied would depend on the conduct in question. So when you do what's called the transposition exercise for the purposes of the dual criminality test, you don't necessarily have to identify an identical offence under UK law. You look at the conduct in question. What has the accused person allegedly done, and would that conduct, if all things being equal, it had taken place on UK territory, would that conduct amount to UK offences?
Does it seem as if the defense is doubling down on trying to present this as Trump against Assange?
Well, it's extraordinary, really, because this case has taken on a life of its own, and there are all sorts of interesting arguments being made, not just by Julian Assange's defense team, but an awful lot of people are wading in on the debate here in quite an unprecedented way, and it depends very much on who you ask, what kind of slant they're taking. So just by way of example, we had a few days ago Australian members of Parliament calling on the UK not to extradite because of the harsh treatment that Mr. Assange has already faced in the UK, psychologically speaking. That theme was developed further in a letter earlier than that by a number of physicians and psychologists worldwide who had called for an end to Mr. Assange's psychological torture and medical neglect, in their words. Those themes are echoed by the UN Special Rapporteur on torture, but we also see other bodies such as the OSCE and indeed the Council of Europe highlighting the freedom of expression stroke media press freedom angle that also raises interesting human rights type arguments. The only example of this that I've seen so far as an outlier is Amnesty International, which interestingly doesn't call for the UK to refuse extradition, but calls on the US to drop the charges. And I think that's an interesting distinction, because these arguments ideally should be directed to the US and not to the UK.
Just briefly, if possible, as I understand it, Julian Assange's lawyers are claiming it's all political because there was an offer made for some sort of amnesty if he agreed that Russia wasn't involved in the 2016 campaign. But the underlying charges had nothing to do with that, right? They were the confidential documents long predating the 2016 election.
Yes, the reason why they're going down that route, I suspect, is because if they can demonstrate that the prosecution now is politically motivated, then that is a bar to extradition. And I think much is being made of the delay here in requesting his extradition.
It's a fascinating case. Thank you so much to my colleague June Grasso and to Anna Bradshaw of Peters & Peters law firm over in London. Coming up, Iran held its parliamentary elections over the weekend. We talk with Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute of exactly what they did. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got steep losses for the U.S. stock market with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all dropping. S&P is down 3.2%. The Dow is down 3.3%. NASDAQ slumping 3.6%. Both the S&P and the Dow have just about given up their gains for